When you're thinking about upgrading your workspace, the first question that pops up is whether you really need a full-size tower, a laptop, or something in between that sits almost unnoticed on the desk. That hesitation is real. Spending a few $100s on a box that looks impressive but ends up being a disappointment is a risk we all want to avoid. I've spent the last couple of weeks testing a few compact machines, and today I'm breaking down the Kinupute AI Mini PC to see if it lives up to the hype, fits everyday workflows, and stays honest on price. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start with the basics that matter once you pull the unit out of the box. The Mini PC measures roughly the size of a thick paperback, which means it clears a lot of desk real estate. If you work at a small home office or have a tight workstation, that tiny footprint is a genuine win. It also drops into a TV stand or a shelf without looking like a piece of industrial hardware. The downside? The compact chassis limits internal expansion. You get two DDR5 SODIMM slots that are soldered onto the board, so you can't add a third memory stick later. If you think you'll need more than 64 GB down the road, you have to plan it now. Port selection is another practical factor. The unit offers two 2.5 gigabits per second LAN ports, a Wi-Fi 7 module, four USB 3.0 ports, one USB-C with Thunderbolt-compatible speeds, an HDMI 2.1 and a DisplayPort 2.1. For a machine this size, that's surprisingly generous. I was able to connect a dual-monitor setup, a fast external SSD, a wired Ethernet backhaul for my NAS, and still have room for a USB microphone and a webcam. The two Ethernet ports make it easy to do link aggregation if you need extra bandwidth for file transfers, which is something you rarely see on mini PCs. The trade-off is that there's no dedicated SD card slot, so plugging in cameras or other media devices means reaching for an adapter. Thermals and fan noise often become the hidden cost of miniaturization. The Core Ultra 9285H inside this box runs up to 5.4 GHz under load, which is impressive on paper, but the heat has to go somewhere. In my stress test, compiling a large C++ project while rendering a 4K video in the background, the fan settled at around 38 dB. That's louder than a whisper but quieter than most office fans. In a quiet room, you'll notice it after a while, but it never becomes a distraction. The chassis vents are positioned on the side and bottom, which helps keep the top of the unit cool enough to place a small plant or a decorative piece on it without worrying about heat buildup. Performance-wise, the combination of the Core Ultra processor and the integrated ARC 140T GPU gives the Kinupute Mini PC a sweet spot for productivity and light creative work. Opening a 200-page Excel spreadsheet with dozens of linked tables while pulling data from a SQL server felt instantaneous. Switching between Chrome tabs, Slack, and a Photoshop document with a few layers was smooth, and the GPU handled a 1080p video encode in roughly half the time of a typical mid-range laptop I own. However, if you plan to dive into heavy 3D modeling, large-scale video editing, or AI model training that pushes beyond a few cores, you'll start to see the limits. The ARC GPU is capable of 8 cores, which is great for 1080p or modest 4K playback, but it can't compete with a dedicated RTX 3060 or a desktop-grade GPU when you need sustained rasterization power. One of the selling points that people often overlook is the dual 2.5 gigabits per second LAN ports. I used them to bond two separate internet feeds at my home office, essentially giving me a 5 gigabits per second pipe for downloading large data sets. If you run a small media server, a home lab, or need a reliable wired connection for video calls, this feature alone makes the Mini PC feel more like a network appliance than just a workstation. On the other hand, if you're a pure remote worker who relies only on Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi 7 module is fast, but you won't notice a huge difference unless you have a compatible router and are transferring multi-gigabit files over the air. Now, who should actually consider buying this machine? First, freelancers or small business owners who need a dependable, always-on desktop for office suites, email, web development, and occasional design work. The small size means you can hide it behind a monitor or mount it behind a TV for a home theater PC setup. If you already own a decent monitor with DisplayPort or HDMI 2.1, You can drive up to 3 displays at 4K, perfect for a multi-monitor trading desk or a creative workflow where you keep reference material on a side screen. The built-in AI acceleration is a nice bonus for developers experimenting with inference on the edge, but you won't need that to enjoy the day-to-day speed. Conversely, you should skip the Kinupute mini PC if your primary use case is gaming at high settings, intensive.